Someone who says, I'm going to be a part of making that goal happen. I'm going to be a key part, a catalyst. I want to be in the middle of this when it happens. I don't want to be watching from the stands and applaud. I want to be part of the team that makes this happen. At the end, when we rejoice together, I want to say that I was a laborer. I was an agent for God. In God's kingdom, we could say this: it's a person who is willing to be used to bring about God's purposes. And when I think about all God's purposes in this world, I wonder if one of the highest is this: for revival to come to people's lives and hearts. For revival to come to people's lives and hearts. Revival is simply this: it's seeing the unsaved move from death to life. Revival is this: seeing the spiritually shallow move from lukewarm to hot. Lord, I want to be a part of that. Lord, I want to see that in my day, in my generation. Lord, I want to be an agent. I want to take an active role in this happening in order to produce this will, this effect, Lord, that you have already spoken of. What a joy to see this among the people that we live with. I'm sure each of us could stand up and tell stories of someone in our lives, our workplace, our families that we saw become revived, become saved, become on fire for Jesus. And I hope that when you look around you and you see a lack of spiritual life in those who are unsaved or lukewarm, that you'll join in with Jesus when He said, I have come that they might have life and have it more abundantly. Jesus turns to you and says, will you also go that people around you will have life and have it more abundantly? Jesus said, that's why I came. Are you on my team? Then everywhere you go, I want you to be an agent of my life in order to bring revival in them. This is God's desire and purpose, no matter how dark, how bleak, how hopeless the atmosphere is. You know, sometimes when we see this word revival and we get all excited about it, we kind of do a reality check on ourselves and go, no. This world has passed the point of no return. There's no turning back. It's a slippery slope, and this world and everyone in it has gone way too far down the slippery slope. And that's why I'm glad that the man we're going to talk about tonight that was used as God's agent of revival found himself in a situation like ours, a wicked, dark atmosphere of sin. It was a bad time in God's Word. 1 Kings chapter 16, starting at verse number 30, describes it for us. It says, King Ahab came to power. He was the son of Omri, and he did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any king before him. He not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam, but he also married Jezebel, daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and King Ahab, the king of God's people, began to serve Baal and worship him. It continues in verse 32 and says, and he set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. He also made an Asherah pole, and he did more to arouse the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, than did all the kings of Israel before him. Right there in God's own land of promise, he set up an Asherah pole, he worshiped Baal, and God was no longer exalted and worshipped. In fact, it says that other things other than God, pagan idols, were exalted and worshipped, and Ahab led the people in it. But in the midst of all of this sorrow and sadness, there was a man in the Bible who was willing to be used as an agent of revival, and his name was the prophet Elijah. The Bible tells us about Elijah that when God called him, and we first get introduced to him, that he prayed earnestly to God and said, God, I want to be used by you. I want you to shake up these people and do something. He prayed earnestly, and God said, the first thing I want you to do, Elijah, in answer to your prayer, is I want you to speak judgment over the land. And so he walked up to Ahab and Jezebel, walked right in the throne room and said, there will be no rain on the land except at my word. And then he walked out, and God said, you're going to get killed. I got to hide you. And God hid him. Almost 3 years go by, And there in this Middle Eastern climate, right where Israel is, there was no rain. The famine was getting intense in the land. It was of God's hand. They couldn't blame it on the devil. It was of God's hand. God was trying to stir the people to revival. And I can see Elijah there hidden. As the years go by and the months tick by, his cry was earnest to God. Lord, send revival. Lord, I spoke the words that you wanted me to speak, and the people are suffering. Lord, send revival to the land. Use me as your man. Use me as your agent. Lord, I'm ready. Whenever you say the word, I'm ready. Is that your cry? Lord, I haven't seen it yet, but Lord, I'm ready. Whenever, I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. You say the word. Give me the opportunity. I'm ready. And in 1 Kings chapter 18, the moment came. We'll know when the moment comes. May we be ready. May we be prepared. Ready with the armor of God when that day comes. Be ready, because it came for Elijah, and it said he met King Ahab in a chance meeting, right? No, there's no chance with God. And Elijah said this in 1 Kings 18. He said, now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. Amazing the authority that God gave Elijah to speak, that Ahab would listen to him and obey. But Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. And there they were, gathered up at this altitude on Mount Carmel. And Elijah went before the people and said, how long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. And the people said nothing. This kicked off what would end up being a fascinating chapter, but by the end of the chapter, God had sent revival. And I want to just, in this Bible study tonight, go through what Elijah did in this moment as God's agent of revival. We're going to look at 4 things that Elijah did that day that serve as a model for us to be used by God as agents of revival. At the end of each one of them, I just want to pause and just say, Lord, we commit ourselves to this. Lord, as you call us, as you give us opportunity, we will. So what did Elijah do as God's agent of revival? What did he do? I believe these things are written down for us so that through the promise, the endurance, the hope found in Scripture, we might be filled with hope for our day. Number 1, he did this. Elijah stood alone. He stood alone. I don't think he wanted to. I don't think he just was like this lonely loner who just didn't want to be around people. It was because the situation called for it that Elijah stood alone. 1 Kings 18:22, up on the mountain, facing the people, Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left. But look over here, he said, but Baal has 450 prophets. What a unique scene it was up on the heights of Mount Carmel. It was time for the showdown. I could see the announcer standing up there in his tuxedo in the middle of the boxing ring. Here we are today. In this corner, we have the current reigning champion, King Ahab, with the gold crown on his head. Give him a hand, and the people clapped. He said, and beside him, we have his team, 450 prophets of Baal. And in this corner, the challenger, the guy with the hairy robe and the weird belt and the beard, Elijah, prophet of God, the challenger. And who do you have with you on your team, Elijah? It's just me. No, I mean, where's your team? Like your support team? Like who's going to help you if something goes wrong? Just me. It sounds so noble and courageous. We're like, yeah, stand alone. Yeah. Until we have to be the Elijah in our story. I don't know exactly the feeling that Elijah must have felt, humanly speaking, that day on the mountain, standing by himself. A sullen crowd ready to jump on him with the slightest mistake. And 450 prophets standing over there feeling so smug because they had the power of the king on their side. And Elijah was all alone. In fact, he was so alone that the Bible tells us in the next chapter, when he was on the run again, that he complained to God and said, God, I think I've come to the conclusion I'm the only one left in all of Israel who serves you. And God came to him and said, oh, no, you don't know it, but I have 7,000 reserved for me. You're not the only one. But I wonder if those 7,000 that God had strategically placed throughout Israel, each in their own place, families, communities, towns, did feel alone like Elijah. Have you ever felt like that? God places you in a situation, in a classroom, in a family, in a workplace, and you say, I'm the only one. I've looked around. I've wanted to start a Bible study at my work. I've wanted to, but there's nobody there. No, I feel different. I feel like an oddball. And Jesus says, don't worry. I've strategically placed you there as my agent of revival. I've made you a light in a dark room. I've sprinkled you out like salt from the shaker of heaven and put you there. Remember, Jesus says, it doesn't take much salt, just a little few granules to make a difference. But one thing I ask of that salt, that it stand alone. That it not blend into the food and taste just like the food, because if that's the case, then why did I save you? You're just good for nothing. But if I shake you out and you taste different than the food I shake you on, different than the dish that I put you on, and you stand out uniquely, that's when you're making a difference. That's when you're the light in the room. Remember the Elijah, the nicknamed Elijah of the New Testament? Who was that? John the Baptist, right? Boy, he was an oddball. He was one who stood alone. He was the voice in the wilderness. But there was a reason, because God had plans to use him as an agent of revival to prepare the way for the Messiah. I encourage you, don't be different or counterculture just to stand out and make a name for yourself. That's just self-grandstanding. That's selfish ambition, which the Bible says leads to every evil work. Instead, say, Jesus, as I follow you, if you send me into the desert, I'm okay with that. Lord, if you stand me alone on the mountain facing the 450, Lord, if I'm known as the weirdo at my work, the oddball in my family, Lord, I'm okay, because I'm your agent of revival. Are you and I willing to stand alone? As hard as it may be to what God has called us to be, it's the first requirement for bringing about revival. Would you pray with me that just for a minute? Let's bow our heads together. Lord, we pause right here in the middle of the sermon just asking that you would give us such Holy Spirit power, such undergirding of grace, that when we feel overwhelmed and alone, Lord, that we will know, as Pastor B said just a few minutes ago, that we are not alone. Lord, you are with us. Lord, if this is what you are asking of us, to stand apart, to stand alone, God, we didn't choose it for ourselves, but if you ask it of us, Lord, we will say, yes, Master, I will. Lord, I'll stand alone. I'll be laughed at. I'll be persecuted or mocked, Lord, but I'll rejoice because, Lord, you have never left me and you are going to use me. I will, Lord. Yes, Lord. I pray this, Lord, together with my brothers and sisters. Amen. Stand alone. Stand alone. We got to do that. Number two, we got to do this, what Elijah did. He relied on the power of God. Oh, this is so important. He was a unique guy. He was. He had some uniqueness about him. It said he wore a very unique trademark hairy garment that when people would see him, they go, oh, even though I've never seen his face, he's the guy with the hairy garment and the leather belt. He was a unique guy. But he didn't rely on his personality or his voice or his past. He relied, especially this day, on the power of God. I believe we have to have something settled in our hearts as agents of revival, and it's this, that if there's going to be any change, any transformation, any life that comes into the situation, any light in the darkness, it's only going to be from the miraculous, heaven-sent power of God. 1 Kings 18, verse 23, Elijah said, "Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves. Let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other, put it on the wood, and not set fire to it. Then you call in the name of your God, I will call in the name of the Lord, and the one who answers by fire, he is God." And he said that to the cross-armed people, and the people said, "Okay, sounds good." Sounds good. What you say is good. Elijah, prompted by the Lord, no doubt, had called for this meeting on Mount Carmel. And I believe God had whispered this to him. Elijah, I'm going to bring you up there and get the people's attention to give them a chance to display my power. He didn't say, Elijah, I'm going to get you up there to give a rousing sermon, though if God called for that, Elijah would have done it. Not to beg with them, not to tell them, come on, guys, haven't you suffered enough over the past 3 years of famine? Come on! Aren't you sick and tired of this state? No, don't convince or plead or beg. Just stand back and say to them, do you want to see the power of God? Are you ready? The people's hearts, you see, were far from God, so hardened, so far from God, that no amount of intellectual pleading would have got through that hard heart. The concept is stated again in the New Testament when Paul said in 1 Corinthians, he said, my message and my preaching were not with wise and persuasive words. He said, I knew the only change that was going to come was a demonstration of the Spirit's power, so that in the end, your faith wouldn't rest on any human wisdom, but on God's power. I believe this with all my heart, that this current generation is so saturated with earthly glory, more lights and technology and information and knowledge than ever before. But there's one thing this current generation that you and I live in is missing, and that is God's power and God's glory. So I encourage you, don't try to compete with the world's ways. See, if I could just kind of get side by side with the world and outrun them in the glitz and the glamour and the glory, no, you won't do it. They got more money, more experience. They'll outdo us every time. But if you and I say, Lord, let them see your glory. Lord, reach into their heart and shake them up from the inside out. Lord, give them a dream in the night. Lord, do something. Come down and fill them. Lord, if you and I do that, if you and I make this our cry, Lord, do something in our day that only you can do. May this world-saturated generation know that it is you. Then God says, I've been waiting for that. That is what I will do. That's why when you and I walk into a situation and we feel alone, it's okay to feel very insufficient, very incapable, like, Lord, you chose me to stand here. I don't got anything. And Jesus says, I know. I wanted to make sure that you didn't come striding in with bells and whistles as a one-man band, because I didn't want the people to think it was you. It was in Acts chapter 4 that the disciples wanted so badly to see revival spread in Jerusalem. But they were facing some very difficult opposition. So they gathered to pray in Acts chapter 4. They said, Lord, send revival. Enable us, your servants, to walk in your power as we go out. And this is what the result was in Acts 4:33. With great power, the apostles continued to testify to the resurrection. They said, guess what God's power can do? Guess what it can do? Power was on them. They spoke in power, and God's grace was so powerfully at work in them all. Wow. They relied on God's power. Make sure, if you are going to go out as an agent of revival, you know what the real catalyst is going to be. Would you pray that with me? Lord, we ask together as a church, Lord, that when we gather on Sunday mornings and a visitor comes in, that we wouldn't think, I can impress them with something that is going to happen, or the nice carpet or the chairs. Lord, may we say, Lord, come down in power. Lord, may the secrets of their heart be revealed. Jesus, when we start to witness with somebody, Lord, let us just fall back on you and say, Holy Spirit, give me the words. May something I say just come inside their hearts and reveal something inside that I could have never known on my own. Lord, fill us as your Spirit-filled people with the word of wisdom or discernment or knowledge, miracles and faith to believe, Lord, that you and your power will bring about lasting change. We're asking this, Lord, in Jesus' name. In Jesus' name. Amen. Point number 3 as we move along here tonight, Elijah didn't only stand alone and rely on God's power, but he trusted God's timing. Oh, this is so important. This is so important. You know, God knows what he's doing. I can't tell you the number of times, right, I'm sure you could as well, that I have thought that I had God's timing all worked out. I'm like, okay, I did this, and ta-da! God, you're supposed to come in when I say, ta-da! You missed your cue. And God says, no, I'm not on your cue. No. Trust my timing. Do my will, but trust my timing. Something can be God's plan, His goal. He's even given His promise. And you say, I know it's God's will. But like a baby in the womb, it needs to be full term. If it comes out early, right, it's not going to survive. It's not going to be of Him. It's going to be ill-conceived. So, Lord, I trust your will to go full term, Lord. And when it's ready, it will be delivered. And Elijah had to do it that day. 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 25. And Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire. And so they took the bull given them and prepared it. The context tells us it was the morning time. They called on the name of Baal from morning until noon. Baal, answer us, they shouted. But there was no response, and no one answered. So they took it up a notch. They danced around the altar they had made. Verse 27, at noon, Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is a god, huh? Perhaps he's deep in thought, busy, traveling. Maybe he's sleeping and needs to be awakened. And they took the bait. And they shouted louder. And they took it to the next level. They slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. And it ends in verse 29 saying, by midday past, they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. Morning to evening, but there was no response, no one answered, no one paid attention. Rewind with me, if you will, to the beginning, when Elijah said to the people, the God who answers by fire, He's God. Agreed? They're like, yep, agreed. And I just know that at that moment, God said, Lord, this is the first chance I've had in 3 years. This is the first time I had the people's attention. Lord, please. Look. People, He said, just give me a second. Lord, please. Just, they're ready. They're watching. They're leaning forward. Could I just walk over to the altar? Just say, hallelujah. And just you send the fire? Please. They're ready. I might miss my chance. And God says, no, Elijah. No. Tell the prophets of Baal to go first. And Elijah obeyed, and he went to the prophets of Baal, and he said, you go first. In front of the people, they started calling on Baal. We just read it. They danced. It was noon. They shouted louder. They danced. They slashed themselves. They danced. 3 p.m., 4 p.m., still going. It's near 5 p.m., and they collapsed with exhaustion. We give up. What was God doing during those hours? What was God doing? Well, He was probably doing a lot of things, but I noticed 3 things that God was doing during those hours that He needed to do. First, He was exposing the false, worthless gods that these people had kind of trusted in for 3 years. They had always kind of thought, well, if the king follows it, he must be powerful. I guess I've never seen it, his power, but I'm sure he does. And they got a first-hand front row seat that Baal had no power. We got to trust God's timing. When God is leading somebody through a difficult season and we're praying for them, we're like, Lord, please. God says, trust my timing. I'm exposing the things that they have leaned on their whole life. You know, Baal was known in the land of Sidon that he had been imported from. He was known as the god of fertility and the god of the storm, of natural forces. His reputation, Baal's reputation, was the god who could bring the storm clouds and the rain. The people all knew him as that. And that day he was exposed as a fraud. Lord, I trust your timing. You're going to expose the false gods that people believe in. Secondly, I noticed this. You know why God allowed this? Because He was tiring and weakening the false prophets. All day they danced in the hot Middle Eastern sun all the way through noon to 4 p.m., the hottest part of the day. Oh, and by the way, there was some significant blood loss as they cut themselves. I tell you what, they were so weak by the end of the day that finally when God came through and Elijah says, get them and kill them, The prophets couldn't run away. They were just like this, right? They were so weak. God had a plan. God knew what he was doing. And then finally, letter C here, God was creating a longing in the people for true divine power. Over and over in the Bible, God would lead his people to the Red Sea and create like a longing. Lord, we need you to come through right now. Lord, if you don't come through in this moment, we're dead. We're dead. We need you. Let us trust his timing. Sometimes you and I, we're believing and we're saying, God, nothing is happening. You're not doing anything. Satan's has basically the floor. And God says, oh, I am working. Lord, many are the things you have planned for us, oh God, especially when it comes to revival. If we plant and sow and believe and trust his timing, let's remember 2 Peter 3:9. The Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some understand slowness. Instead, he is patient, right? Not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. When the false prophets were done, Elijah built an altar in front of the people. He told them to draw near, to watch again at what it meant to build an altar God's way. He brought them back to the altar, Pastor. That's a good sermon title. Got to remember that one. Back to the altar. That was last Wednesday. If you weren't here, go back and watch it. Back to the altar. He brought them back to the altar. And then he did this. He prayed. Point number 4, he prayed, prayed, and prayed again. We're going to let our prayer be at the end and pray that we will trust God's timing and we will do this. But I want to make sure that we don't miss this point. Verse 36 says, at the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and I have done all these things at your command. He said every step has been what God has told me to do. So answer me, O Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. God didn't call him to dance, to cut himself, to scream, just to stand and to pray a bold, direct, humble prayer. Lord, it's time. Lord, they're ready. Lord, they've seen the gods, the false gods aren't real. Lord, they're hungry for you. Let them know that you are God. And the next verse says this, verse 38, then the fire of the Lord fell. It burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil. It licked up the water in the trench. And when the people saw this, they fell flat on their face and cried, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. The result was dramatic and sudden. What a moment. God's power fell. He answered Elijah's prayer, and it says it was even more dramatic than he could have anticipated, because it didn't just fall down on the sacrifice, but it consumed the entire altar. I want you to know that there will be times like that when you stop in front of a situation and you lift up a bold and direct prayer to God. Those moments are wonderful and exciting, and God answers. But I felt led to end this point by telling you how the story ended. 1 Kings 18:42 says, so Ahab went up to eat and drink, but Elijah went up to the top of Mount Carmel, and he bowed himself down on the earth, and he put his face between his knees, and he said to his servant, go up now, look toward the sea. And the servant went up and looked and said, there is nothing. And he said, go again. And he did this 7 times. And verse 44 says, and at the 7th time, the servant said, behold, a little cloud like a man's hand is rising from the sea. And Elijah said, go up, say to Ahab, prepare your chariot and go down, lest the rain stop you. And in a little while, the heavens grew black with clouds and wind, and there was a great rain. A couple hours before, Elijah had stood in front of the altar and prayed a 2-verse prayer directly and boldly, and boom, the fire had fell. But now this same Elijah sensed, once the crowd had left, that there was a need for pressing in prayer. And he gets down on the ground, and it says he puts his face between his knees, and he says, Lord, Lord, Lord. And he starts to cry out and he says, Lord, you've sent your fire. You've sent your fire. The people have seen that you are God. But Lord, now send your refreshing revival. Lord, they've seen that you are God. Now they're not going to deny it. But now, Lord, they're so thirsty. Lord, you promised times of refreshing for those who repent. Lord, fulfill your promise. Lord, do it. And he got up. Nothing. And he, Lord, send refreshing revival, send it. And he cried out. And he did it 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. This wasn't the type of prayer in front of the people so they would hear and know that he is God. This was the private prayer. This was the all alone, go in your room and close the door, deep prayer. And it was the same God who prompted him for both. And the revival, the full revival, the fire revival and the rain revival that Elijah so longed for happened because of his prayer. I want you to know that God may prompt you to pray boldly about something and just to believe and to say, Lord, I prayed and it is done. And that same God, for the same person or maybe even the same situation, may also prompt you to give some pressing in private prayer and press in and press in. Press in. Doesn't mean something's wrong with you and you had a lot of faith when you stood up and not enough faith when you were bowing down. No. We just got to know that's the mystery and the wonder of prayer. Do you know that God speaks this directly to us in James 5? It says, the effective, fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. Yes, it was Elijah, who was a man, a human with a nature like ours. He prayed earnestly that it wouldn't rain, and it didn't rain for 3.5 years, and he prayed again 7 times, and the heaven gave rain, and the earth produced its fruit. He prayed for God to move, and he prayed again, and he prayed again. You know, I'm encouraged by this final point because to me, this is almost the most important one because it tells us here that that's how he started being used by God in the very beginning, and that's how he even completed this revival process through this 3.5 years. Remember that definition of agent? A person or thing that takes an active role in a specified effect. Don't ever say, if I pray, it won't make a difference. It says the effective, fervent prayer of a righteous man means you have an active role in the effect of seeing revival come. Believe it. To be righteous is to walk with God, walk in the light with God, right? To walk in the light with God. You walk with Jesus. You belong to him. You say, Jesus, I walk with you. I walk in your light on a daily basis. You do that and you pray. Oh, you are God's agent of revival. Would you pray about that with me?